All right, good evening, YouTube. Welcome to the Atheist Roundtable. And my apologies up front for the confusion on the site tonight. Obviously, if you're tuning in, you were on the Atheist Asshole page. YouTube was being a little funny and didn't let us start going live on the Roundtable page. But here going forward, any roundtable discussions or debates will be on the Roundtable channel. But we are here for this evening, so anybody jumping in, we appreciate it. If you're tuning in, it's awesome, and we're gonna have a great discussion tonight. So first and foremost, as far as introductions are concerned, I have my compadre, my partner, and my co-host, Jesus Mike.
How you
Thank you,
guys
sir.
doing?
Always appreciate you being on here with me and investing time here. And then obviously myself, Austin, the atheist asshole, and you can find both Mike and I on TikTok as well. That's where he and I met. A lot of great content on there. And pardon our sarcasm, but most importantly tonight, our guest of the evening, and I always have mad love and admiration for any theist or Christian that will go and sit at a round table with two or three or whatever atheists and have a have a live dialogue, a live discussion about their worldviews, their religious views, and I respect that. And Landon and I have had some conversations offline, and so far I think he's a great guy. And I won't put all your personal business out there, but Landon, the recent loss in your family. Again, I know I said it, privately, but publicly, all of us, even the atheist community, that we're involved with, I made sure that we all rallied around you, in that time. So again, condolences, sorry for your loss. Hope you and your family are doing better anyway. But
Thanks, man.
Not a problem. We're all still humans, regardless of worldview. So,
Absolutely.
But Landon, you kind of know what our goal is for tonight, and that is to have a discussion. We're not here to debate and yell and scream. There definitely will be cussing, but it's not going to be at you. Uh, but to discuss life, religion, God, belief, supernatural, whatever comes into that. But the first question that we have for you tonight, Landon, is to please just give us a snapshot, and whatever you're comfortable sharing, we appreciate it. But kind of how you grew up, what your childhood looked like in your teen years. Now you're an adult, and you're at where you're at today. So kind of walk us through that and share where you are today.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, thank you guys so much for having me on. I sure do appreciate the opportunity. I think what you guys both do is a good thing. I know you might hear the opposite sometimes, but um, if anyone's ever going to hold a belief and does not think it's a good idea to be challenged, I don't think they're very confident in that belief. And so, what you guys do is great. I think um, being able to look at your faith or look at what you hold as true and have it challenged is a wonderful thing. So, but anyway, yeah, I'm Landon. I live in Alabama. I'm a senior at Clear Creek Baptist Bible College, which is actually in Kentucky, but I'll be graduating from there in December. And I'm going to kind of share just a little bit about my story. I became a Christian when I was young. Kind of, I fit right into that indoctrinated as a child kind of kind of stereotype. But it was I have a family. I'm very thankful that our two wonderful parents. I have a wonderful sister, a wonderful younger brother that um, believe in Jesus. And when I was about 8 years old, my mom kind of helped me understand as an 8 year old the best an 8 year old can kind of get and understand what the gospel was. And this idea, this belief that God had a son, and it was Jesus, and Jesus came to the earth for every single person alive and died for their sins. Most certainly, in no way did he deserve it. We deserved all the punishment. And so, as an 8 year old is when I began to believe. Now, I think with anything else, as an 8 year old, a 9, 10, 11, 12, you understand things at whatever understanding you have at that age. So as an 8 year old, I believed in the gospel with the best understanding that I had of an 8 year old. As the same with a 9, 10, 11, 12. When I reached kind of that 13, 14 year old area is really when I started to have it challenged for the first time. Now I lived in Alabama now for 13 years, but I previously lived in Mississippi 8 years prior, and so I mean really just directly in the direction of the Bible Belt, and so not a new idea. People in my town, many people had the exact same belief about who Jesus was, and and that he's a loving God, that he's compassionate to his children. Now, where I started to have a little bit of issue with this is whenever I had some things happen in my life that I didn't feel like mirrored who this God was explained to be. They talked about God's loving. I had parents that were fighting and discussing who was going to split up and go to which kid was going to which home. I had friends who, I mean, you guys know how it is being a teenager. You have friends who you thought were your friends, and things happen, and just hurts. And so I started to think, if God is loving, why don't I feel any of that love right now? If God is supposed to be this God who takes care of me, why do I feel the way that I do? And I didn't really understand it, and I didn't ask my parents questions about it, not because I felt like I was going to get beat or anything, but to be honest with you, I felt like asking them was only going to add to any other. Oh, great! Now on top of marriage and jobs going haywire, now our son's starting to have these bad thoughts, and so I kept those to myself. And I have a best friend since I was young that lived in a town named Salvador. Salvador had a brother named Cesar. And the only reason that's important, Cesar had been arrested several times in our town for breaking and entering, things like that. Just kind of a misguided kid. I think he's 17. And just to be frank, he was a douche. He was not a nice guy at all. I hated going over to Salvador's house sometimes just because he was not a nice guy. I hated being around him. He would do it. He would make me feel terrible about myself, even though it's my best friend. It's like, man, the only escape I have is my best friend, and his brother's a jerk. Like this is awful. And Cesar had a really, really remarkable experience. I won't get into too far, but essentially he had a run-in with the law again. They were going to send him to a little bit further of a punishment for what he did. And a family took him in and started to explain to him who Jesus was. Cesar became a Christian. And I saw him 2 weeks later on, and I kind of had that feeling of, oh no, I'm about to be around him again, and he had a completely different aspect to him. And so I even still left that alone, because even if he seemed different, I didn't want to be around him still. You never know whenever he's going to go off the hinges. But Cesar started to ask me questions about the Bible that I never thought of, and I most certainly couldn't answer. Thinking about even just details about popular stories. If you, as a kid, you grow up in church, you learn about Jonah and the big fish. You learn about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the furnace, and God pulling them out. And so he'd ask me these things, and he's a new Christian. So regardless of what you think about Christianity, he's someone who's in this new belief system. And for someone who's new, coming to somebody who had been a Christian, at that point, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, he was asking me questions and I just couldn't answer them. The reason I couldn't answer them is because I in no way was reading my Bible. I didn't feel like it. I felt like I was so hurt by things that were going on. I just really didn't want to have to do that. And Cesar asked me these questions, and he had a purpose for it. And I learned later on. But as he would ask me these questions and I wasn't able to answer him, he said, Landon, don't you think it's a little odd that I've been a Christian for 2 weeks, you've been a Christian for 9 years, and you can't tell me anything basic? And it really, really speared through my heart, thinking, oh my goodness, he's right. And, people don't have to believe the way I believe, but I fully believe that God was using Cesar to lead me to study him more. And so I began to read my Bible more and grow closer to God and his commandments. Now, I say that as I tried to continue to grow closer to God, I'm still a teenager, man. I'm still a bonehead who messes up all the time. And so Cesar was just a huge help to me. But what I found was God allowed me to doubt his existence, his love for me. I mean, all these things. But as I had that doubt placed in my mind, I started to also study and read more. And as I would study, I would find my faith being stronger, because if you don't believe in something, or maybe your faith in something gets a little knocked down, and you study it and you find some things maybe you didn't see before, it's going to kind of re-energize you. And so that's kind of where I've led. I did not want to go into ministry, and Austin, you might have this experience, having people all around you growing up in the church, maybe having parents who are close to the church saying, you're going to be a pastor, you're going to be a so-and-so. Look, I don't care if you grow up there and leave or not. I didn't want that at all. Maybe it's just because to be like, haha, my parents got it wrong. I don't know. But like, I definitely did not want that to be a part of it. And so it's kind of funny where I am today, about to finish Bible college. And I believe that God wants me to be able to lead a church someday, a body of believers, a community, to be able to serve him and to serve our community wherever I go. Doesn't matter where it is. And so that's kind of where I am today, though. I do want to mention, kind of on the front side, I will never knock anybody who says they have doubt in God by any means. I don't think that's the proper thing to do, because I know how it feels to just not really get kind of the things lining up. If God's so loving, I read about his love, man, John 3:16, he died for everybody, but I'm alone in my room and I feel like crap. So I get it. But I also believe that God puts us in certain positions to be able to study him and learn more. And so that's part of the reason why I admire the things you guys do, because, and even tonight, if you guys present a question that I don't know, I promise you, I'll let you know, I'm not really sure about that. But I will promise that I will study it and look after it. I don't think that there is something that can be asked we cannot study and try to find the best evidence for. And so that's where I am. And so I'm very thankful to be here with you guys.
Sure. Yeah,
awesome.
That's great.
No, thank you, Landon. And Jesus, I'll let you, if you have any questions, I'll shoot it to you to go first, brother.
Sure. I didn't want to, take anything away from what you said. I thought that was perfect there. But I wanted to pull up my stream so I can see you. There we go, because it went away. So I didn't want to go. I wasn't going to go into really any kind of like, I gotcha. Did you know about this historical thing? All my questions that I'll basically be asking you are just how you, basically the steps that you got to your belief, and the way that I use these questions essentially can be used for almost any claim. This doesn't have to be used for Christianity or anything like that. It's not necessarily required.
Before you ask, this is kind of the basis where you guys come from, kind of a sense of street epistemology coming from.
In a sense, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Are you guys familiar with Peter Degovia? I can't pronounce his last name.
I've heard that last name.
Yeah. So from my study, Peter influenced Anthony heavily in terms of street epistemology, or epistemology rather. I think Anthony's the one who took it to street and did that. But in terms of what of using epistemology, in towards theists. But you're right, you can use it in any sort of way. I was just going to mention, Peter has a brilliant story. He's really funny. He's obviously, he and I have different beliefs, but I think he's really talented. He did some academic journal pieces that were he's been in the news. I'll put it that way. But if you ever watch Joe Rogan, he does kind of sit down with him, kind of explains. Peter's a very smart guy.
Is he the one that has the man that wrote the I can't remember the name of the book, but the manual for creating atheists or something like that? He's the author for that?
I'm not sure. That's a good question.
I know it's where Anthony gets a lot of his thing from. I think it's kind of goes down a trail where it's these guys kind of, I like what he's doing there, take that, I like what he's doing there.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I think with Anthony, I talked to him a little bit on TikTok. I don't necessarily I like his style, but I think what gravitated me towards this was, I like that, but there's things I would do differently, and then hence where we are now. But
Anthony
is
an epistemology god, though.
Yeah, can't take anything away from him. I study him for sure.
Very good. Very good at how he asks questions, and honestly, he actually is the reason I got so turned, into. I wouldn't say he's a sole reason, but he's a very big reason why I've looked a lot into apologetics. We had a course at our school that actually had us watch some different things he did, and really he did a very good job asking questions. And I think what it taught most of all is to be prepared to have an answer for whatever it is, right? It doesn't have to be Christianity, but
Exactly.
but to be ready for it. Because if you say, I think in a part of it, he goes and he says to this young guy, which is now objectively Dan, the guy he's now an atheist who has his own show.
Sure. I will preface that guy is not an atheist because of that moment. A lot of people keep misconstruing that he that moment made him atheist. He self admits that it was a process for him. That's just kind of what got the ball rolling for him. But a lot of people use it. A lot of people want to just say, "Oh, Anthony turned him atheist," and that's not how anybody gets turned. You don't like break away a giant rock or anything in one swing. It's just not how that works. So,
but something he asked Dan is, he said, "Dan, would you rather have faith or evidence?" And I don't think he knew what to say as a Christian. He said, "I'd rather have faith." And it really struck a chord, because I understand that, and I know people who would say things like that. As a Christian, I believe in faith. I personally believe that everybody has to have faith in certain things, even just everyday things. I believe we have faith in certain aspects, but we also have evidences, and I believe that Christianity is not fully just faith. I believe there are evidences to it. So whenever he said that, I just remember going, "Oh no." Just because I know folks, if they were asked that question, they might just say faith, because they hadn't studied or looked at any sort of evidence.
Sure. Also depends on how you define that and all. But as I ask you these the questions, I was going to plant a flag, where everyone can see it, where you feel free to answer these as long as you want. The idea is to kind of keep the questions rolling through, but I won't stop you or anything by any means. So no issues on that. And I also am not going to get you to commit to any type of 0 to 100 belief scale. I don't think that I don't think that approach makes very much sense in my eyes. But yeah. So I did want to touch on, because one of my first questions was do you think doubt is beneficial? But it sounds like to me that you already hold that position that doubt is beneficial. Is that correct?
I get maybe a better way for me to answer is doubt. Doubt can be beneficial if it's used in the right way. So, for instance, if I say I doubt, I think we all know there's some people who doubt maybe in themselves, for instance, that use that in a kind of a self-destructive way, to where other people might at first doubt themselves, and it can be with anything, whether it be like your body, your mind, your the way you talk to people. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I think that the doubt can be used in a good way. I think there's also evidence about that, and I'm not going to. I don't want my answers to only come across as just man, Psalm so and so says this, man, because especially if no one has a supernatural belief in that. Why would I? But I just want you to kind of understand where the background's coming from. So
sure. That's why. I wanted to make sure you clarified that. That's exactly what I was looking for. So
in the Psalms, you look at David continuously the dude's like straight up depressed. He's like, for rave the day I was ever born. Why was I ever come out of my mom's womb? Everything is terrible and gloomy. But David also has a part of that where he comes out of his doubt and then back in and back out. But he has a process of going through doubt to go through a positive outcome.
Sure. And do you think I wanted to do the doubt thing, but it sounded like we're kind of on the same page with that, so it doesn't really some people kind of give me a little bit more of a problem with doubt and say that doubt's not good at all, but I think we both have in terms of any claim, I think that we both agree that it's beneficial, and depending on how you analyze it and go from that point. And you did say you use a little bit of faith and evidence. What would you define your faith as, and are you using it, and are you using this in the same way that you come to other conclusions?
Say the first part again. What would I define? What
would you define faith as? Like, are you going the Hebrews 11:1 kind of definition, or are you going in with more so how you use it in every sense of your daily life?
Yeah, well, I'll say this, man. It's actually been kind of a backwards thing. Like, for instance, when I was younger, I would say I had faith in Jesus because it seemed to be the I thought, wow, this all sounds pretty positive. Like, it makes sense. The feelings that I have kind of in my mind. I'm not relying on feelings. So we'll go back to what I mentioned in the first part.
Sure.
But these conclusions that I'm coming to with reading God's word and going back to it seem to interlock. However, I would say that my faith has been strengthened by evidence in the same way that I mean anything. If we were to talk about the fact, for instance, in Georgia might have gotten some as well, but like Alabama had like a bunch of tornadoes over the past couple of days, and we have like I'm pretty sure more tomorrow or the next day, something like that. And so I've got some faith. We're going to have some pretty bad weather, but obviously it's tornado season. This kind of thing how it happens. But also now with some evidence is we have some things on our radar. We have some things coming our way.
Sure.
So I think faith has to have a substance of, or pardon me, I believe faith is very beneficial whenever you have substances of evidence. I think that's very important.
Sure. Okay. And so if you did require, evidence for this belief, or you did have it, what would that evidence look like? It doesn't have to be very specific. You can give me the specific ones that give that to you, but
sure. Are you talking about Christianity in general, or that there's
sure
a God?
Yeah, for it could be towards the entire religion, or it could just be specifically pertain to Jesus. It could
Sure.
be, or it could be just little elements in there that because I've talked to people that they don't agree that the resurrection has the best evidence. They would say that other parts have better evidence to infer the case. But I want to know what yours would be.
Sure. This is probably a little backwards, but I would say mine is resurrection first. And again, I'm going back to the Bible to explain where my kind of reasoning is. Even Paul talks about that.
Sure.
If Christ did not resurrect, we've wasted our lives. So, I think that's very important to be able to look at. But then I think something that's second, and something I'm going to talk about Friday night with Austin, is the aspect of the creation of the world. And when you look at the cosmological part of it, I think now that again that does not prove, there's not anywhere necessarily written on the stars that Jesus is Lord.
Sure.
But that you only get to theism at that point. But I believe if you continue to do evidence, and again, Austin and I hope we'll kind of have some dialogue about this Friday night. I believe the evidence points to Jesus. This whole deal about if you believe in a God or you believe in not a God, if you believe in Jesus or believe that there's nothing, I think is very helpful if you are somewhat mathematical in terms of, or scientific if you want to say that, but if you look at probabilities, I think probabilities have helped me out. Now, I'm not saying that if we only believe in science, not that there's not a God, that your probability is zero. I'm not saying that by any means, but I do think it is important to look at both of those.
Sure. Yeah, we could get into an entire discussion about whether someone uses naturalism or something else, but that's definitely what I did. I don't want to pigeonhole the conversation into because I don't think it's productive.
But if we could, hey man, I'd love to be able to come back and do something if we ever want to talk about something specific.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you, do you, with those types of evidences, do you rely on things like maybe like the modal ontological argument or like teleological arguments? Do you use those types of like arguments and premises, or are you look at the actual universe and based on those observable pieces of evidence that's more so what you're going with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think absolutely. I think when you look at the facts surrounding, again, Jesus' resurrection, I think is something that is so large because again, it's kind of the foundation of our faith, right? If that was able to be, if you look at probabilities, look at things that are not, kind of going against it, I could really see how that could be persuading to say, yeah, well, man, I should really question all this stuff because that's kind of the main thing. And so looking at the minimal facts argument with Gary Habermas, I think is really incredible. I think it's one of the best. His dissertation is just remarkable. If you believe in Jesus resurrection or not, I think it's really cool that something that we always put on like the Bible. I think it's really cool that we can also look at sources that are outside of it. So for Gary Habermas to even be able to write those things, again, let's just say everything's false. I think it's really cool that he did not use any of those things to cite and kind of use secular reasoning that way.
Sure.
Circular reasoning.
I can totally get behind that. Do you
What's
think,
up, Pastor Mike?
I saw him in the comments as well. Do you think that faith can be unreliable, and maybe not even just for your claim, but for any claim? Do you think
certainly, yeah.
Okay. And do you think that for your claim that faith would be required?
You say is faith required?
Is faith required?
Well, for it to be true, no.
Okay.
If yeah, absolutely. Now, to have, I believe the Bible teaches for us to have a relationship with Jesus, we are to have faith in Him. But my feelings on it don't really change the fact if something's true or not. And that's true. I think that's true with anything. But faith most certainly can be misleading. Thanks, Velociraptor. Who is that on TikTok? Who is that?
It's his. He goes to Uncle Stevie and Velociraptor.
Cool.
Do you think that your understanding of the world, say biology or cosmology, impacts your beliefs? And would you say that possibly you might not have a full understanding of those things, or could you admit that you would? Okay.
Oh yeah, no.
Sure.
Oh goodness gracious, of course.
Okay. If you found out based on these say misunderstanding of biology or cosmology, and things started kind of crumbling down in a second, would you examine your belief to maybe to look at its legitimacy or its validity? Or do you think that wouldn't? Do you think those things wouldn't change it?
Well, I would like to. First off, I'd say yes, it would absolutely cause me to examine, and I will forever examine my faith. I always want to make sure I do that. I think it's very beneficial. It's not because I don't think it's true, but I think it's very beneficial to, again, always check what you say you believe, check what you claim, and put some things against it. See if it doesn't last. However, I would like to be able to, could you give an example of that, or do you want, you don't have to, but do you want to give some sort of example to that, or are you just saying in general? Things were brought up.
Sure. I mean, we could go into like, would you think that our current understanding of biology and evolution would have some contradictory results in regarding Genesis?
What are you talking about? Like macro, micro, or just in general?
Just in general. I mean, we don't have to get too specific into all that.
No, I don't.
Because you might not believe in certain aspects of speciation, so I don't want to paint you in a hole where you're not.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. No, I think I don't think it would claim it to not be true. And I'll tell you this: as far as the creationist part of it, I hope, and I don't really take you guys as this kind of these types of people who disagree with me, but just like atheists have different views, not everybody's the same on everything. Of course, Christians are not the exact same as well. So, for instance, I don't have hold a view that the earth, is really, really young. I think all scripture needs to be examined in context. I think there's some good context. And again, if we want to debate that another time, and I'd love to be able to talk to Austin about theism versus atheism, what's kind of more what best explains reality. And then even if we want to go into textual criticism, I'm not the best person to look through there, but I think it's important to be able to break down and look at the context of anything, of course, but especially if we're going to claim that someone rose from the dead. Yeah.
Sure, exactly. I have just a few more questions, but I wanted to kind of input something of myself into this question. I want to go about life believing in as many true things as possible and limiting the amount of false things as possible. Would you think that that's a good way to go about life?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. And so let's say if we have somebody who believes in Vishnu or Thor or whatever they might believe in. Let's go with Vishnu because it's a religion that's tangible, at least. A god that's tangible in regards to the religion. Oh, so it would be one of the Hindu gods. Okay. If I think we could both agree that the Hindu has the right to believe. I don't think me and you will have any contention on whether they would have that freedom. But I guess what I'm getting at here is, what kind of steps do you think me and you could possibly take to figure out, who would be right in this situation?
Are you talking about the person who would be a Hindu versus myself, or Hindu versus
Sure,
you? Or are you
yeah.
saying in general?
Oh, it could be all three of us. But I mean,
Okay.
I wouldn't. I don't take an affirmative, so it's kind of hard to put me
Okay.
in
Cool.
on there.
Yeah. So I think first look at what their evidences are, right? And things that are reliable. Again, I want to make this clear. I do not believe theism and me talking to you is as mathematical as 3 + 3 = 6.
Okay.
I don't. And a matter of fact, I'll go as far as to say, could I be wrong? Yeah, I could be wrong. Absolutely. I don't believe I'm wrong because of the evidences that I've seen and the things I've looked at. Now, not just in a personal sense of I was alone one night and God magically talked to me, and nothing of that nature, but in terms of some different things that are there. So I think you look at what their claim is. First off, I think it's important to make a claim. I don't get a lot of. I guess I don't necessarily see the point if someone is only questioning and does not have any sort of helpfulness to themselves as far as, hey man, you're dead wrong, but look, here's a possibility. Maybe
Sure.
it's this. Let's examine this together. I think that's whenever it's very beneficial for both.
Sure.
And so for that the Hindu person, for us to kind of look at that evidence and go from there is important.
Sure. I got two more questions. I don't want to hog up all Austin's time, but do you think that the Bible? I mean, and you've kind of already answered this in a sense, but I think there is a distinction to be made here, and I just want to make sure. Do you think that the Bible is sufficient on its own without independent verification, or do you think that you could find everything that you need and be justified in the belief just on the text alone?
Well, I guess it depends on what your definition of need is, right? If what I need to know is the reason I came here and that's it.
Like, okay, let me rephrase. For any person, do you think the text alone would be sufficient for them? Like, would they be justified, or would you require more? Do you think it'd be beneficial?
Would it be beneficial? Well, I'll put it this way. I believe, I believe in a God. Obviously, if there's a God, I believe He can do whatever He wants to do with people who are reading the text. Mm-hmm. And so He does not need Landon Tucker to exegete and talk through every single thing. Now, God, I believe personally, God has placed different people in my life that I can help talk through some of those things, but I believe God's word on its own can do things much bigger than what I could do.
Sure. And I guess my last question before I head it off to Austin in this regard for the more faith evidence type of spiel, do you find yourself using the same standards of evidence for other beliefs? Why or why not?
Yes. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'm trying to give an example of. So there is past evidences you can look at. So let's just say past experiences. Mm-hmm. I believe. Pardon me. Too much Dr. Pepper. I believe that God has given me experiences for me to see, for me to look back on and go, okay, well, this is kind of a previous experience. I have some kind of experience in this, and then on the flip side of that, I can look at different evidences that maybe, let's just say, other people discovered, that I can look at and go, oh wow, that's amazing. Now, in the same way, let's just say that flip that around on an evidential claim of, I don't know. I'll use this Corona deal for what's, for everything that's going on. Whenever we are able to see different evidences of this is how we don't spread things. This is the best way to do this. I don't take their word for it, and just run with it. I think It's important to be able to look at, okay, well, am I going to Walmart with 300 other people within 2 feet of me? Is that the best idea? Is it, and so I think it's important to make sure that it needs to be across the board, the same standard of evidence.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, and I'll appreciate those. Are really honest answers. When I try to question, at least when we first go into this first line of questions, I think that's where point out my difference between like people like Anthony is that I'm not trying to necessarily I don't want to trap anybody. I'm trying to just genuinely see where their beliefs comes from, so then I can actually have the dialogue if we do go into something where I can't.
I appreciate
I don't
that.
straw man you or anything, because I've come to find out that it's easier to make yourself look kind of like an ass whenever you don't, actually know the person's position. And just because it might be a blanket statement of Christianity doesn't necessarily mean that you can just assume the reasons for why they believe.
And vice versa on atheism, right? There cannot, if there's a blanket person to claim that I don't believe God exists, person A is not ever, almost ever, the same person as person B.
Sure.
And so, man, it's really important. I think it's also important, and you did a good job of this, of understanding the person's background as well, because background plays a huge role in it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can even talk about the geographical things, right? I grew up in Alabama, grew up in Mississippi. How was I not going to be able to hear it, right?
Sure.
And so I think learning those backgrounds is important. I think there's also, and Austin, I think shares this. There's also a level of trauma that people face sometimes that is the reason. Let's just even say maybe the reason they don't even fool with it at all. Not just study it, but be like, dude, I don't want any part of it. If this is the person that represents,
Sure.
Christianity, I don't want anything to do with it. And the same thing happens sometimes with atheism. Like, man, if everybody acts this way.
Agreed. Every time I had someone on a stream that was just trying to flood up the stream with all religious people are retards, and I was like, that is just like not anything I want to be associated with, so I'm blocking you.
Yeah.
So I completely understand that. We're gonna take it back to Austin, who looks like he is in a cinematic thriller in terms of the lighting of his camera. But no, I appreciate the sorry, I appreciate the answers to the question. I think we can go more into like a dialogue, once once we go through a little bit more.
Yep. No, and this is well, first of all, Landon, thank you for sharing that and being transparent, and I know Jesus threw a lot at you there, but I prefer his question asking style up front, because he really digs in. That way we really do have a good solid foundation and understanding of what you believe and why you believe it. As far as your life story, how to build up to where you were, and you shared tons of good information there. So we appreciate it. And for those that are listening and viewing in the future, that's why this is titled for now and moving forward, the Atheist Roundtable, because we want a discussion. Notice it doesn't say the great atheist debate. This is something that I think is missed in our community, and I've been guilty of it, and I'm sure Mike would say that he's been guilty of it, where sometimes Christians, and you haven't, Landon, personally ever done this to myself anyway. They're quick to snap off just ridiculous bullshit, where it's like, what are you talking about? Because I probably know the Bible as well as you do, maybe better. And as soon as they start spouting off, I'm like, well, no, actually, this is what it means. And then they look like the ass, So the whole thing is, how do we get to know each other, so that way, even if I still disagree with your vehicle, which is your religion, we still have a common ground. How can we help human beings? How can we make an impact? And how can we make a difference, even though we violently oppose each other's religious views? Now, are we always going to be challenging you to you and any other theist that we have on our show, or that we meet in real life, to always be skeptical? Always be skeptics, always ask questions, and always investigate. Absolutely. And I think, whether it's with religion or business or life, if you're not always asking questions, and you're not always skeptical, and you're not always trying to gather more information, you're foolish. Yeah. You're foolish if you're not doing those things. Again, we appreciate you having or coming on and be able to have that conversation with you.
Can I ask you a question before you go into some things? This is kind of for both of you guys. Have you found that when, let's just say, Austin, when you go up against somebody, is there a sense of, and you know it, Austin, very well, I imagine, a sense of church speak, right? When they're up against their wall and they're a little afraid and they say some sort of churchy sounding thing, you're like, dude, what are you talking about? Does that happen?
Well, so I'll give you my answer, and then Mike can give you his. They see, it's twofold for me, because there are some people that have no idea of my religious background, so they lump me into the, oh, you're just a retarded atheist asshole, which is where that came from, that hates God and hates Christians. Just open the Bible and you realize how loving God is. Like that's the knee-jerk reaction once I corner them. Okay. But if I'm talking to someone that understands my background, and then I'm actually pretty efficient with scripture and biblical context, historical context within the Bible, usually what they do then is then they contextualize. Well, you're taking it out of context. Well, you can't do that to me either. Because like, I won't go through the whole story, but I had a guy do that to me 3 or 4 days ago. And I said, no, actually, if you picked up your Bible, you would know that this is what it means. So for me, it's probably a little different because of the trajectory, so to speak, because once they find out that I am, pretty educated in that realm, it makes it, tougher on them. I feel like that was kind of scrambled because I get so many different responses. Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I get a lot of different ones. I've recently got a lot more. I get like, if I count just the comments, I'm getting like hundreds a day, so I can't look at them all. If I talk about just like the messages I get, like direct personal messages, I find myself actually having very productive conversations with people. But it's really on the basis of them, if they want to even do that. Because like I just had to block someone for the first time because they just kept insisting that I already believe this, but I'm suppressing it, which is probably the most offensive thing you can do to anybody, regardless of what belief we're talking about. Because what you're doing at that point is just saying, I already know what you think, and then there's no point. Like, even if we're not going to touch on the arrogance, which is just pure arrogance. We have a problem here where this person is inquiring about your belief, but then they're telling you what you believe. So what was the point? Because if you've already told me what I believe, I can't say anything to you that will convince you otherwise.
Sure.
And I'm justified in holding that belief because it's what you've just presented to me. But other than that, like I typically just get, the most common thing I'll get, at least preachy wise, is just, oh, well, something can't come from nothing, or like the typical like go-tos, which is just kind of like, I see where your headspace is at, and I think that's what separates like Landon from user 752 on TikTok. There's a huge gap in the type of just like person that they are, regardless of what they think is true at the end of the day. Even if they think the earth is square for all they think, they're just fundamentally a different person, and I think that has more to do with it than the belief.
And Landon, if you can do all of us atheists that have deconverted from Christianity, if you can do all of us a favor and let your fellow brethren and sisters know that just because I'm an atheist doesn't mean I hate God, because I don't even believe that he exists at this point, or at least I should say there's not. I haven't found the good enough evidence to suggest that in my life. But the biggest thing is, don't tell me that I still love God and that one day he's going to save my soul again. Like it's so annoying, and people wonder where the atheist asshole moniker comes from. It comes from that bullshit. Well, telling me.
Well, you said it was retard atheist asshole. Remember, we couldn't use retard atheist, so we had to switch to atheist asshole. So, for obvious reasons.
Comes from, though, with anybody who says that to either of you guys or anybody in your community, it's laziness.
Sure.
If my only
and I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, it is. If I believe, and I do, that we have a purpose for living, And I believe that ultimately God has instilled a purpose. I believe it comes from God for everybody, and that I want to share the good news. And let's just say the only time I ever get, Mike to look at my comment, the only thing I'm saying is something that I'm just going to pass off and not going to interact with them in any sort of um, in any sort of way. Or same thing with you, Austin. It is not biblical at all, as well. If you look at Peter and John, there's a story in Acts 3 where these guys are heading off to the temple. At this point, Jesus is resurrected, so they're getting some notoriety. And the very next chapter, not very good notoriety. They get thrown in jail and beaten. But at the moment, they're headed to the temple, so it's kind of a safe space at the time. And there's a guy chilling there at the gate, and you notice the guy is lame from birth. The Bible explains, just kind of chilling there on his own. And the Bible says that they didn't just say like, "Hey man, God bless you," and like keep going. That they took time to be with him, and really incredible. I'm sure they had other things to do. I'm sure that they had, they're in somewhat important folks at this point, but they took time to develop them. And that's the exact same thing I think the Bible shows. And so for any Christian or anybody who claims to be a Christian to just be like, hey, you know what, man, God bless you, I'm out, I'm never going to talk to you again, is laziness. I'd rather you not say anything at all, because what's the difference in them saying that? And what about the guy who was even a bigger jerk to you that said, yada, 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 one day you'll believe in God, not right now. But anyway, God bless you. They didn't make any sort of difference in you. All they did was, if anything, stir up more, not necessarily disdain that strong, but in some people, I'm sure. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry that that's.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're all not responsible for our counterparts. We all just we're our own separate people. So
thank goodness.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's not like when I could go into a little side story on kind of where the atheist asshole label came from. That's for another time, but but that's a piece of it. Where it's like that's where the asshole comes out. As soon as you start assuming that you know what I think and how I feel and how my life's going to turn out, what I believe and what I don't believe. Like I don't do that to you. Now I question it, but I don't tell you, oh well, one day you're going to doubt, one day you're going to become an atheist. Like I don't do that. I've never once done that to somebody, So, but getting back to the roundtable questions, Landon. Again, we appreciate you being on. I think it's fucking awesome that you're willing to field all these questions. And like I said, in between, just like there, you have questions for us, please let us know. But going back to your original story or first few minutes there, you're sharing part of your story. You mentioned reading the Bible. And that friend of yours that challenging you to read the Bible, and that either causing you or helping you to grow closer to a God. Can you tell me what that means? Like, how did reading that book help you grow closer to a God?
Sure. Yeah. So it's in a level of understanding. So my experience with the part where I'm talking about is, generally speaking, I would hear stories. Let's just say a Sunday school teacher taught me, or mom or dad, whatever the case may be, and not do any sort of study on my own, and just say, well, that's good enough. Kind of what you're talking about with not knowing your Bible, maybe knowing, I know this principle that God is love, but you also have to be able to answer, okay, well, what about this objections people might bring up about, man, there's some things that really look bad in the Old Testament. Are you gonna say God is love and leave it and not do any studying? So it came from looking and reading myself to be able to see the context within the passage, so that whenever God explained, for instance, Romans 5:8, that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. Well, that sounds great. Sounds neat. I get it. Christ died. But then whenever you also read in the context of the things he endured physically, but also you think about the things emotionally, and how humble. Hey, look, if a God existed, for him to humble himself to come down to die for me, I'm a piece of garbage, man. Why in the world would anyone do that? And so when you start to look at the context of the reasons and kind of the how and the why, I think in those senses, it started to strengthen my faith. And then also looking at the Bible from the beginning, from Genesis to Revelation, as a story. Now, albeit it is a massive story. It is not something as simple as Rapunzel. It's something that needs to be able to be studied and understand the context within things. But making sure I looked at context really helped me understand, instead of just a blanket, here's the story, take this characteristic from it, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Okay. All right, I have a question, but I'll save it for later, so we can save time up front. Because I'm a I really push back on context in the Bible, because I feel like Christians really try to use context or time periods to justify a lot of really fucked up shit. But we'll get in that in the latter part of this conversation. My next question is, and it's it was ironic to hear you talk about kind of the age frame that you started to quote unquote believe, or buy into the God concept, or the God claim, because as I shared with you, my brother, which is a pastor, is about that same age age frame that he started to believe that he was supposed to, or that they believed in God, because we were raised in church from the time we were born,
Yeah.
and it was about that age where he was like, oh, it's called to the ministry, and so on and so forth. Why, seeing how the role of a quote unquote pastor as we know it in America today, okay, seeing how that's not in the Bible, that role, that job, isn't in the Bible, how do you know that you are called or chosen or supposed to be the pastor or associate pastor, or whatever that role is? How do you know that that's what you're supposed to be doing with your life?
Yeah. So when you say role of pastor, you're kind of talking about, listen, American, this guy's at First Baptist, yada yada yada, and he's the pastor of that. Is that kind of where you're?
Correct. Yeah. Like my brother's a pastor of a non-denominational, spirit-filled, church.
Characteristic. Got some snakes
What's
in
that?
there. Characteristic church.
No. He's come a long way. He's not that wild anymore. Now, back in the day, my whole family was that wild, but he's much more conservative now. That actually not now. My brother would never have that man step in. But just to give you a little snippet, the church I grew up in, those guys like Copeland's, the Rod Parsleys, all that, like that's what I grew up on. Like that's what I was. Yeah.
I'm sorry, man.
Oh, me too, brother.
Goodness gracious.
No wonder I'm so fucked up. No, I'm kidding.
No, and I'd love to discuss that. And if we can't do it today, I'd love to talk about it a little bit Friday. That's a crazy world. So, well, first off, I do want to mention, being the pastor of a church, being let's just say a music person, which if I watched your video correctly, was your mom a music person or kids person or something?
She was a music pastor for 20-something years. Yep.
Okay, cool. So like a kids person, a youth person, a music, whatever you want to call any of those fields. In no way are they a bigger Christian. In no way are they loved by God more. I want to preface that. I know that's not exactly your question, but I do not subscribe to any sort of deal that Jesus loves Pastor Matt Chandler out of the Village Church in Dallas, I think, more than he loves Susie Ann, who goes in the back row of a, or someone serving with the children's ministry. I don't think there's no evidences of that, and I'm afraid when we talk about charismatic parts there are some aspects of that really scare me. This godlike complex that they are the person. Don't you question what they say? I just don't think that's correct at all. However, I do believe that through evidences of calling. So I'll go back to that, and I'll share a little bit of that if that's cool, of myself personally. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, I did not want to in any sort of way be able to lead a group, lead a church, lead any of those things. Not just because like I want to be a bad kid. I didn't feel any sort of evidence that was a call by any means. Now I want to be faithful to God, and I actually want to work in television. I don't have a face for it, but I wanted to do it, and do those kind of things, and not do anything with that, and still be a faithful Christian, and still serve my church, and still do those things. And through through, I honestly, I feel like it's almost as if there is a desire of, let's just say, journalism. And I still write for the newspaper here just because I like doing it, but it's not all I'm passionate about. It's almost as if my dial of journalism, my love for it, just got tuned down. It's like this is good stuff, but I'm not passionate about it. And God instead, I really feel like put a passion in my heart to be able to lead other people. Now I'm 24 years old. I'm not married yet. I hadn't even finished my college degree yet. I am not pompous enough to sit here and say at 24 years old, I'm about to lead this group of whatever 40 to 90 year olds and lead them spiritually every day. I don't think it's something that I'm ready to do yet. But I do feel like God has given me evidences to be able to study His Word and want to lead a group of people. In a church, whenever we look at it, again, there's a lot of churches doing a lot of different things, a lot of crazy things, but it is a body of believers. If we talk about the Christian church, body of believers that ultimately want to glorify God and reach out to their community. And that's something that I'm very thankful our church takes part in. We most certainly can be better at it. But I think that's something that God's given me a passion for. So I want to be able to lead and help people and not just because they say I'm a Christian. Oh, cool. We'll help you now. That's not biblical at all. I believe that we are to help all people, and God's placed us in a certain community. For instance, the place where my church is, their church is all over, as y'all can imagine, I'm sure, Alabama, much like Georgia, like Mike can see. There are churches all over the place, and those churches are placed in areas to help that community. Our church is placed in the community to help the specific spot where we are, as well as places around the world we want to be able to take part in as well. And so I believe God has given me evidences for that. So whenever it comes to reading the Bible, reaching out to people, evangelism, and I think the important thing to notice up front, and I've been knocked down several times, might even be knocked down again tonight, but to recognize that I'm not all that by any means. I'm a screw up in more ways than one, whether it be a stutter or whether it be lack of knowledge in some areas. But to help lead a group of people that say, man, we're broken as well, and we are going to continue to lean on God and help other people who are also broken, and accept people where they are spiritually.
Okay. So my question or follow-up question, I guess, to that would be, so you and I via text message talked about the homeless stuff that I do here in Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
and this is not to, pat myself on the back, but I'm using an example.
I think it's a good example. I think I know where you're going. Go ahead.
I don't need, I didn't need a book or a God or a pastor to give me guidance to know to help people. Right. I did that because I understood that there was a need, like I shared with you in the text. I was riding around on my scooter, my electric scooter. Yeah. And I was like, holy shit, man, there's a lot of people that need a lot of shit in this city.
Sure.
And I just started packing my backpack full of whatever I could pack it full of. And we'd go down there and not just go down there and drop it off. Because here's one thing from growing up in church and know it. And, and I know other pastors would, probably share the same sentiment. I know my brother would share the same sentiment that, the church's number one flaw as far as community engagement with the homeless, especially and addicts, is the follow-up and a follow-through. Like they're great at showing up.
Absolutely.
But they suck at the follow-up and follow-through. Yeah. And the one thing I always make sure I do is I don't just go drop it off, but like I do my best to sit down. I'll smoke a cigarette, hang out with them, like sit up against the wall on the pavement. I remember one time my oldest son went out with me. It was like 20 degrees. We stood out there for 2 hours just hanging out, and they loved it. And I didn't even realize how long we were out there until we got to the car and I couldn't feel my hands or feet. And the reason I say all that is because before, when I was in the church, I would do that with theists, with Christians, and we were out there for 15 minutes and they were already complaining, hey, we already dropped off the shit. Can we leave?
Right? You took a picture and then everybody smiled. Hey, we're helping. And then they put it down, right? I understand. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the reason I say all that, Landon, is tying it back to the question I had about, why or how you believe you're supposed to be a pastor. I don't think that anyone, and this is not a disrespect to you or even my little brother. I don't, if you really have a heart to make a difference in this world and you want to impact humanity at its core and you want to make a difference in people's lives, you shouldn't need a God or a book or a guy that stands up on a stage to tell you what the fuck to do to impact humanity. So that's so at the core of it. That's why I did that at that question. Why do you believe that you're supposed to be, you or anybody are supposed to be that point person to do that? Like, why is that needed?
Sure. So I think it's something, if we wanted to get into a little bit more Friday night, is I think there is a level of, first off, you're right. You do not have to have a divine, let's say, calling from God. You don't have to have some sort of moment where this page opens up to a specific spot and you're like, go help homeless people. You're absolutely true. To know that people need help. I absolutely agree with that. Now, I think you probably know where I'm going on this. I think there's a reason why for that God gives us all kind of a moral compass. And obviously, again, you don't have to step foot ever in the church. We're not the only people that have things figured out. Matter of fact, I would say that there's a lot of just regular charities that do a lot of really incredible work that are focused on helping people. Now, I think the question where we have to kind of we can get into tonight, or obviously tomorrow or Friday if we have more time then. But I guess if I can ask this to both of you, where does that come from? I know it's a question you guys have heard a whole lot, but in your head, in your mind, kind of where does that, that they need help, of course. Do you have any sort of thought as to where that comes from? Or is it just kind of like, I obviously know it, so I'm going to go help.
Sure. I do. At least I have, I don't claim like Cartesian truth or anything. I'm not saying that this is absolutely true. I don't think any position I hold, I could ever say this is absolutely true, because I always want to leave the door open for being wrong about how, because we can have good evidence for anything, but we could also misinterpret the evidence, and we could also have evidence and it be bad evidence. But in regards to the overall kind of moral dilemma, this just has to do with evolution and how we've evolved. This is what's been beneficial. This is what's kept the population going. There is an internal and inherent, maybe I wouldn't say inherent, but there's an internal need for this type of interaction amongst nearly all social creatures, because of how beneficial it is to keep the species. If we don't care about these things, or we disregard these things, there is no conversation. And I don't know how far you go into with your beliefs in evolution. I'm actually minoring in biology.
Oh, cool.
So it's been something where I actually want to go, after I finish my computer programming degree, I actually really want to go back to school and major in biology, because I really want to get a job, and it's more of my passion than programming is. But from everything we understand about how our brain is wired, this is just how we've come to evolve. And I'm somebody who generally goes under generally subjective standards, but there's an objective sense of just well-being for others. And when we find that is not the case in certain people, we find that there is something neurologically wrong with them, or that there's something that is deviated from the normal processes of our brain, and how our neural correlates actually respond, and how this has evolved through time to benefit us. So for me, long-winded is just evolution. I mean, it's pretty much blueprinted into us, or else we wouldn't survive.
Austin, if you don't mind, would you answer that as well? And then I'll go, if it's okay, could I go back to Mike and ask him a question on that?
Sure. I think he's frozen.
Oh no, dude! There was a ghost.
Or his mic is muted.
Hello.
Oh, there we go.
Yep. Yeah, and to keep mine short, because most of what Mike said is kind of my perspective on that. I believe it comes down to well-being and the good of humanity.
And
oh no!
And he dropped.
Jeez.
I'll speak for him since all atheists have the same brain that we're all borrowing from each other. No. Well, just go ahead, I guess, and ask me the question that you had.
Yeah. So I think that's that's understandable. So that for well-being, that we've survived this long, so be good to each other, is because we've continued to keep the species alive. My question to that though is, but why is that? Why is that good? I do get it. It goes back to, we want to make sure we help one another. We're surviving, but even that in itself, why do we know that that is an innate thing that is good?
Well, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm going in circles because I think that's a valid question, but without that, without that need for, the benefit of us even survive, like if we don't have that, we don't have we don't have the conversation that me and you have to be able to question it. So in order for there to be a now, it is predicated on how we've evolved. Whether you think go back from abiogenesis or whatever, there is at some point the ones that did not value this or that did not have this died, and the ones that did kept living. And it's, for me, it's as simple as that.
Yeah. Okay. So I get it, for, let's just say, for ourselves, right? You and I are not having this conversation, but let's just say my children, I don't have any children, but if I had children, or, a spouse, mom, dad, whatever the case may be, people we care about.
Sure.
Even then, I guess I'd ask, why is it still good to do good to them? I agree with you. I think you answered it very well. It seems like, if I'm correct, could be very wrong, but that there is at some point an innate sense of, I want to take care of this person. I want to do good by them. And I guess I just want to know what the reason would be, why, kind of the
that's internal. I mean, that's just the internal wiring of how we are to then now, like, so like we would both agree on that kind of an objective standard there to go off of. I would probably paint it more in the subjective sense regarding on, because it really does depend on, because you can get into these things where will we kill animals and what about their well-being, and then you can get all these weird little things. But it's like at a certain point we have to address the well-being of our species, over some other things or whatever the situation might be.
And I appreciate you. Look, at some point, you've already used this as an example. There is a long rabbit trail that sometimes, man, it's like, rest in peace, Kenny Rogers. You got to know when to hold him and know when to hold him.
Right, exactly.
You got to walk away and say, okay, that's fine. But I'm interested to understand kind of where that comes from, because moral, and I know you get that a lot. So I want you to understand I'm sensitive to that. I know you've been asked the question 1,000 times with your videos. I hadn't gone through and seen what that is. Kind of like what we talked about a little earlier. It's like, man, I wish TikTok had like here's my pin, just so that I don't get asked it again. Here's what it is.
I think there's, and I don't want to take anything away from what you believe, but for me, in regards to the moral issue, a commanded sense of what is right and wrong leaves no analysis or investigation for what is right or wrong. And that's not to say that is completely means it's not true or something, but I find that something can only really be moral if there is an actual analysis of the circumstances or to actually understand what is good or bad. Because when we get into, I don't want to paint you as like a divine command theorist or anything, but if essentially under, if God says to do something and it's right or it's wrong, we don't have a question on that. And I understand that the argument for that is generally, well, that's against, God's nature, if we're going to use like an extreme one like rape or something like that. And I don't want to use those examples because I don't think they're really beneficial for the conversation. But I find that if I'm only doing things morally because that is what is just told is right, rather than what I can actually analyze and consider, sure. I think that in itself is immoral. Yes. But that's just my own kind of standpoint.
And if you don't mind, I want to address. It's a video you had, and I think you can kind of share the story if you want to. But you had, I guess, some guy mentioned that I don't want to put words in your mouth. Basically, what I got from it is that there was maybe somebody at some point who said to you, the only reason, or maybe the implication you got is the reason that they do good is because they believe that God is there, and if He's not there, they'd go do all these things. Is that correct?
Sure, I got
I
it
share
the other.
story.
I got it on the other night on Discord, and I hope the people that said this are listening actually, because once we got into an argument, it was unrelated. Someone was like, "Oh well, if your morality is based that way, then life is just has no meaning or no purpose." And to me, my response, to that was simply, do you only love your family because you have to, or do you actually just genuinely love them? And some people think that's unfair.
Hey!
So I think some people think that's an unfair kind of assessment, but I don't, because, I hold the belief that yes, life is inherently meaningless. I mean, that for as far as I can tell, there really is no purpose. But for me, that makes purpose in life so much greater, because I can decide what a purpose might be, and the ones that decide on purposes that kind of go against the social norms, they're not part of the society. There's a whole construct that we have to kind of, or a barrier that we got to kind of construct around this, of course. But for me, I wouldn't see purpose in life at all if I knew that this 1/1,000,000th of the time I will spend, which is not even a fair comparison because eternity you can't really put into fractions. I think it wouldn't be as meaningful if this is just the cosmic doorstep for me to wipe my feet off before the real life begins. I just don't. For me, I don't see how there would be value or a purpose. I think the purpose would come knowing there's a start point and knowing there's an end point.
May I ask a question real quick, Austin, before you get back in here?
Yep, I'm back.
Awesome. Thank you, Pastor Mike. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Oh, did you say something? Oh, you got a pretty sweet mic, apparently.
Thanks. It's like $50 anyway, man. They look the same as y'all's on mine.
You know what? Just so I don't look weird, I'm going to put that comment up there.
I do want to understand something you said. You mentioned that you do believe that life is inherently meaningless, and because of that, you said there actually could be an advantage to that, because you could you kind of create, kind of find your own purpose, right?
Sure.
I do want to ask, and listen, I get that this goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a possibility for both sides, Christianity and atheism, for that to be a slippery slope of finding my own purpose? Because yours might be very well-meaning in helping people and making sure that you're encouraging them and stepping them in to be better people than before. But person B or C might have a really raw meaning to what their purpose is, completely different and even horrific. And I get it's both ways. I'm not saying it's just on your side. Kenneth Copeland could claim that God's only purpose is for him to have 12 wives, and they must admit, you know what I mean? It could go both ways. Sure,
and I think if we were to analyze Kenneth Copeland's brain, we would find some abnormalities to it. But for me, it's more of like, it's a hard thing to compare, because there's a kind of an equivocation issue where you're equivocating meaning in your life as opposed to meaning of life, and they're two different questions. For me, I cannot accept the idea of a purpose in life unless that has been demonstrated to me, because otherwise I have to think of every person's claim that says there's meaning to life. And since everyone that's come my way has been fundamentally different in every single, even just rudimentary aspects, I don't think it's fair for me to have to just take that on will. But I also will not say, that could never be shown to me. I just, as it stands, and as far as I can tell, there is no inherent purpose of life, at least for me doing anything. Life itself could. But me, as Mike, I don't have any inherent purpose. The universe does not care what I have to think, and I acknowledge that. And I think I live a better life because of this, because I'm not waking up like I used to and just kind of assuming things would go my way, or if I do something good, that something would happen. I can actually analyze the real consequences of just what life is.
Okay, cool. I appreciate you for asking that question. I was a little lengthy in my question, so I apologize.
I was lengthy in my answer, and I don't want to take anything away, but like, you don't have purpose. I haven't found any reason to think that there is one.
Sure, I understand.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. For time's sake, gentlemen, we'll move on to the last part of the round table.
Take it away, bud.
And that is the why. So and Landon, this is where we really want you to be, I guess, a little selfish and focus on you. You know what you've been through, you've shared your journey and where you've been, and you shared the story about your friend, and kind of the way he pushed you and challenged you, that kind of thing. But today, why do you hold the belief, hold the conviction that you hold? Like, what is it that convinces you that it's the God of the Bible, the Christian Bible, over every other religion or every other God? What is it that convinces Landon that this is it?
Sure. That's a good question. I think for me, it all comes down to the resurrection. I've said it a couple of times, but I think that has got to be the foundation of my faith. And I can explain, is this kind of part where you kind of want me to explain my belief in that? Or are you just saying what's the main kind of characteristic of the reason?
All of the above.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, all right. So and it comes from the resurrection. If I got taught when I was a kid about the story of the sheep, the 100 sheep, Jesus there's a shepherd, and the shepherd is watching of the sheep, and all of a sudden he realizes there's 99, and the one has gone off wandering, and Jesus leaves the 99 to go find that one that was going off. That's a really awesome story. That's a neat, really speaks to me that, man, out of everything, Jesus cares about me. Like, again, all I've done is be deceitful to him and lie and all these things. But if those things, if Jesus said that, but then was crucified on a cross and did not resurrect, he was just simply a good teacher. He was somebody who had good ideas, and those people are possible regardless of what you believe. People have great ideas all the time. But mine comes from the resurrection of seeing that first Jesus was a real person, and of course, we have to have evidence of that. I can't just say that because I really feel it in my heart, and I really got to have some evidences for that. And so, looking at atheistic scholars, and I don't have a lot of TikTok videos, but that's one or two of the ones that I do have. Even atheistic scholars such as Dr. Ludemann or Bart Ehrman, these guys who say Jesus was not divine. Don't give me the supernatural stuff. But was he real? And did he lead this group of people? And did he die on a cross? Sure, I'll give you that. But did he go and change water to wine? Did he raise somebody did he raise Lazarus? Come on now, those things don't happen, right? And then you kind of look at Hume and see how these things kind of go with each other. But so then, if you have Jesus who's dead, this is the guy. He is a real person throughout history. Now, then you have the resurrection part of it. Sorry. Then you have the resurrection part of Jesus that comes to knowing that Jesus was placed in a tomb. Now, sure, there are people that have some different arguments on this. Oh, yeah, most certainly. I actually find that it is most helpful to look at people, though, who are, again, of atheists who are a lot smarter than I am, that study this for a living and study manuscripts, study texts, and say, okay, well, we'll give you these things and these things, but as far as everything else, I don't think so. Because if I can start from a place that is even on their side, that's true, that's great. No sort of circular reasoning to that. And so when I look at the fact that Jesus' tomb was certainly empty, now Bart Ehrman even has some different aspects on this particular viewpoint. He said it's possible that his disciples stole him in the middle of the night. Is that possible? For sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's possible. Is it, possible that Jesus wasn't really dead? The swoon theory that he was not really dead. He kind of crawled out of there. Is it possible? I'd say it's very improbable, but is it possible? Sure. But whenever I've looked at these evidences, I noticed that there's a lot of different reasons that if you were going to create a religion, I just don't think this is the best way to do it. If you're going to create something to where the sense of embarrassment that Jesus's own brother, James, is self-identified, doesn't even believe in that Jesus is the Son of God. There's a guy on TikTok, I think Atheist, I think Mike showed me, or Mike posted about him. I think it was you, to where some dude says that he's the risen Son of God. I'm pretty sure that happened a couple days ago. Anyways,
he's the next Koresh.
It was hilarious. I can't remember who it was, but someone was like, "Oh, here's David Corrett." Oh, no. Here's, and like it went through
that was Uncle. I think that was Uncle Stevesy.
Was it? Okay, it was hilarious. But anyways, if we were to look at someone who's going to create something, they would not create it in the basis of, golly, his own brother didn't believe in him. Obviously, I know you guys have heard it, but I'm shouting because I believe it. The women finding his tomb, I think is not ideal. That wouldn't really make any sort of sense. And also the fact, if you look throughout the Bible, and we'll even go back to Psalms if that's all right, with David. I mean, here's a guy who's supposed to be, he's the chosen man of God. He's the guy, man, he's slain Goliath. Man, this is so cool. He's admitting that he's got some trouble believing that God's even real. He wishes he was never born, never slipped out of his mother's womb. Just some really crazy language. That I think when I compare these evidences of Jesus being a real person, people such as he's Russian, so give me some slack here. But Dr. Ludeman, who's an atheist, believes that Jesus really was with the people who were under Jesus' teaching. They believed that he might have really been healing them. Now, he believes he wasn't really supernatural, but that they really thought in their minds that their diseases were just their lesions were just coming off of their skin. And I can't remember what this is, psychosomatic. Mike, you probably know what I'm talking about. I can't think of the exact term. But anyways, the fact to me that even an atheist would say, I'll give you that he was with these people, and these people really believe that he was healed. Anyway, sorry, I'm going off a little bit off track. Fast forward back where we were. When we come to the resurrection, if I continue to look at the atheistic scholars that I think, again, are very smart, much smarter than I am by a long shot, who then bring a conclusion that, yeah, the disciples really did believe that they did see Jesus, but it was just mass hysteria. They were seeing things for 40 days. I just think the amount of people that would have had the exact same phenomenon just seems incredibly improbable. And let me say this: if that did happen, and Jesus really died, he's still in the tomb, he was right there, or that he came down from the cross and was taken somewhere else, and these disciples and the people who claimed to have seen Jesus really went on to share that, yeah, we really saw him, that this is the greatest hide and go seek story and the greatest bait and switch that we've ever seen in real life. Could that have happened? Guys, I'll tell you, sure, that could have been it. I just think that's very improbable. And so we can have some problems with God in the Old Testament. We can have some problems with understanding morality. It's tough. I get it. But I think there's some real evidences. If you talk about things that are more likely, or more things to be able to rely on, I believe in the resurrection. And because of that, I believe God can do anything. Matter of fact, if God can create the world from nothing, or he can create the world just in general, he could be able to do things that seem so nonsensical, like some guy surviving in a fish for 3 days, or again, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being in a furnace without getting burned. Those things don't happen. I get that. But if a God was able to create all these things from nothing, I believe that he'd be able to do those things too. And even bigger than all those things, somehow have the capacity to be a being that cares about each person, as small as I am and as small as talents that I have, not very many, that he would be able to use me. I think it's incredible.
So for those listening, I'm going to take 100% responsibility. My internet here at the house completely shit on me and knocked everything offline. So I apologize, but we are towards the tail end of our discussion with Landon. And again, Landon, we are 100% grateful for you coming on. And the last question, and we'll wrap it up. And we want to ask each person that is willing to come to the round table with Mike and I. We want to ask this question: Why why do you think, as a Christian, as a believer, as a theist, why is it important for you or anyone to come and sit at a table and have this discussion, and talk about these things and discuss these things, and find, or try to discover and find truth and meaning and purpose?
Sure. Well, thank you guys very much for having me on. I really do appreciate it. I've enjoyed time. I hope to be able to speak to you guys again outside of this coming up Friday. So, I think it's important to be able to, whatever stance you hold on a belief system, whatever the case may be, for it to be challenged. Because if it's something that is genuine, if it's a faith that is real, or let's just say a belief system that is real or true, let's just say, you should be able to have it withstand and even be able to grow stronger. I think there's plenty of examples, even if on the Christian side of, the Bible even talks about in Matthew 7 that there is, if you're going to build a foundation, you got to build it on some solid rock. And that is true within Christianity. It's true within any sort of belief system. And I think it's very important to have a foundation by having it challenged, right? You can't really know if a house will stand unless wind beats against it. You don't really know if a car is going to start unless you give it a shot. And so I think this type of form is something that's very important. And I tell you, no one really knows exactly what to expect, but I really do appreciate Austin and Mike for their kindness, for their understanding, their patience, right, when I'm long-winded. But I would encourage any Christian to be able to come and talk and share. It is very easy to throw stones. And if you are a believer in Christ, I do not believe you are to throw stones and simply run away. I think it's important to engage with the people that disagree with you, listen to them, hear them out. I don't think there's one example of Jesus, if we believe that he's the Son of God, I don't think there's any example of Jesus where he simply, 1-2 punched somebody with a quick one-liner and logged off of TikTok forever. He made sure he engaged with the culture. And matter of fact, he was even seen with people that on the surface, these Pharisees, the people who were really these religious leaders, didn't like him being around because they had opposing views. Jesus shattered all of those things, and he went with those people. Now, obviously, Austin's not a tax collector, to my knowledge. He seems like too nice of a guy, but I think it is very important to be able to have these conversations back and forth. And so I'm very thankful for the opportunity. Again, I'm happy to do it any other time. That's an interesting comment, Pastor Mike. And I'll be glad to join you guys any other time.
Awesome. And again, Landon, I don't want to speak for Mike, but I know he feels the same way. We are completely appreciative and grateful for you joining and sitting at the Atheist round table. And the other thing, kind of a side point of us doing this, is there's a lot of people that they see our TikTok reputation, quote unquote, and I put air quotes around that, and they don't realize that we really are very compassionate people that really care about humanity and care about just people knowing the truth. Unfortunately, and I'll name them by name because I don't give a shit. There's the Gregory Locks and the Chris Eulerys and all those that ruin Christianity for people like you that are I feel are good people, and they're there for different reasons, and you are there for. So I appreciate you and your authenticity and just being transparent. And Mike, anything you want to say?
No, I wanted just to make sure that if for your last word before you bow out, if there was anything that you wanted to say, in regards to your beliefs to maybe your fellow Christians or people that aren't, or maybe advice or something, if you would want to leave off on that. If not, no pressure. But I didn't. On your last word, you gave us such a good rub there by trying to tell people to come on here. I want to give you the platform to be able to say anything that might have to do more with your beliefs than maybe even just helping us out.
I appreciate that. I think the reason I said the things I said at the very end, in regards to communicating with you guys, obviously I think you guys do a good job, and what you guys do is important. But if you're a Christian, I think is very inconsistent with, if we believe, again, if Jesus is the Son of God, and we look at the stories in the Gospels, I just don't think that this, again, kind of 1-2 punch, one liner, hit it,
Sure.
the Zynga. I don't think that's important. I believe wholeheartedly that Jesus came to earth to forgive us, to give us purpose, to give us a meaning. And if that's good news, if that's true, that Jesus can give us meaning, can show us, kind of direct us in our lives, why would we not want to share that with people in a positive way? No one ever decided, you know what, man, you really made me feel stupid. I think I'm going to follow what you said. That's great. There's zero people that ever have that example. So I think it's important to have to try to be a good example, knowing full well that you're going to fail, because I do too all the time.
Sure.
But I think that's very important to be able to engage with people who have a different view than you. If we believe, as Christians, I'm just talking to them, if we believe what Jesus said is true. I'm about to head on out. I'll let you guys kind of finish
Sure.
how you guys will. All right.
Yeah, man.
And
Take care,
Landon,
buddy.
do you want to share your TikTok exchange, anything like that before you go?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have too many videos on there, but it is Landy Dandy 24, I believe. Is it? You can follow me on Twitter as well if you want to. There's not a lot of interesting stuff going on over there, but it's at Landy Dandy. Always appreciate anyone's time. If anyone ever has a question, sorry, I'm away from my mic. If anyone ever has a question or has a concern, I'm not one to just leave a reply as it is. I love conversations like this. And I understand not everybody likes them, but if anyone ever looks at any of my videos and goes, I don't think he's right, then man, let's talk about it. I'm always open to it.
That's a
Absolutely.
great attitude. That's the attitude I would hope everybody has. So
Yep.
I appreciate
We appreciate you, my man. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
See you, bud.